Welcome to Just Relationships, the show that offers you concrete ways to make your relationships better. Whether it's your boss, your spouse, your children, or your friends, the quality of your relationships in life directly affects how you feel about yourself and the success you achieve. Your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer, a psychotherapist, telecoach, author, and seminar leader, will interview top experts to help you learn to manage this essential part of your life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer.
Greetings to you. Do you consider yourself a sensitive person? Has anyone ever put you down for being, quote-unquote, too sensitive? Well, if that has been your experience, or if you are around people who are sensitive and somehow there's a great misunderstanding about what that means. So I am very, very pleased to introduce to you my guest, who is an expert on sensitivity, and we're calling that Empath, as in empathic, and she will explain to you. And so this is Dr. Judith Orloff, author of the Empath's Survival Guide, Life Strategies for Sensitive People. Welcome, Dr. Orloff.
Thank you. I'm happy to be on your show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And, well, you've written any number of other books. It's extraordinary. You are so prolific. The Power of Surrender, Let Go and Energize Your Relationships, Success and Well-Being, Emotional Freedom, Liberate Yourself from Negative Emotions and Transform Your Life, Positive Energy, 10 Extraordinary Prescriptions for Transforming Fatigue, Stress, and Fear into Vibrance, Strength, and Love. Second Sight, an intuitive psychiatrist, tells her extraordinary story and shows you how to tap your own inner wisdom. Dr. Orloff's Guide to Intuitive Healing, 5 Steps to Physical, Emotional, and Sexual Wellness. My word, and so many audio books you have as well. So, what inspired you to write this book, Dr. Orloff?
Well, I wrote the Empath Survival Guide because, number one, I am an empath, and I've had to learn coping mechanisms so that I could thrive rather than be drained. And I'm a psychiatrist, and so I incorporate my empathic abilities with being a psychiatrist, treating my patients, and in workshops, because it's ever so useful to use intuitive empathic abilities to read patients and help treat them. And so I wrote the Empath Survival Guide to help all the empaths out there, and there's so many of them out there who are exhausted, fatigued, have chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, depression, anxiety, agoraphobia, whatever you have, and you've been misdiagnosed as an empath, you're not getting the proper treatment. So I wanted to offer this book as a way for empaths to diagnose themselves. There's a self-assessment quiz in the beginning to see if you are an empath, and then give the strategies for centering and protection to help empaths not absorb the energy of others into their own bodies, which that's not a good thing unless it's positive, and to keep their energy up and to keep their relationships good. And so this book is devoted to helping empaths thrive.
My goodness, how extraordinary. And you are in Los Angeles, so right away I'm thinking, can you do phone sessions?
Well, I actually do. You could go to my website, drjudithorloff.com, and my assistant's name is there, Rhonda@judithorloff.com, and set up a phone session. I do Skype and phone, so I work with people throughout the country and internationally.
So in other words, when someone comes in and they would talk about their symptoms, you could prescribe something over the phone. I guess you'd have them mail you the blood work and have the physical exam by a colleague or something like that?
Well, yeah, I'm a psychiatrist, and so I do sessions over the phone to offer people guidance on where to go next in their lives, whatever top 3 concerns they might have. We focus on it and really get to the bottom of it. So that's using my intuitive empathic abilities plus, my other therapeutic skills that I learned at UCLA as a psychiatric resident. So
wow.
I combine all of that. And in fact, there's a chapter on the book for healthcare practitioners on how to really use these abilities with patients but not take on their emotions or their stress.
So your website is Dr. Dr. Judith Orloff, ORLOFF.com, and to book an appointment, someone would just go to Rhonda at drjudithorloff.com.
Actually, Rhonda at judithorloff.com.
Rhonda at Judith. Yes, Rhonda at Judith. So that as a psychiatrist, you really don't have to do blood work.
No, not usually. If blood work is done, then I'll, of course, refer them to their internist or have them go to their internist, because often empaths come to me exhausted.
Yes.
And some of the workup for that includes a thyroid test and adrenal test to see what's going on with both of those. Because if somebody is hypothyroid, for instance, that could really add to a person's fatigue. And so they need to take thyroid supplement. And
right.
if they have adrenal fatigue, which is very common with empaths, they need to be given the proper supplements in order to replenish their adrenals. So those are two important pieces of blood work that most empaths and sensitive people really should get done.
I have so many questions for you, Dr. Orloff, and I appreciate you giving us a two-part interview. And so let's just start off with what is an empath, and what is the percentage of the population roughly?
Yeah, an empath is an emotional sponge where we don't have the same defenses up that other people have or the same filters, so we feel everything. We could be around somebody who's experiencing pain and actually feel it in our own body, and that could be emotional or physical. It's a whole different way of perceiving, and I would say about 20% of the population is labeled as highly sensitive.
Right.
However, what I've seen traveling around on the book tour is that empaths are coming out of the closet.
Right.
And even people who weren't empaths are suddenly absorbing all this excess stress that's coming at us from the news or, the world situation, because our stress level is so high. It's bombarded our usual mechanisms to guard against stress, so even non-empaths are turning into empaths and saying, what do I do now?
Oh, my word. Wow. So the word empath, what is the difference between an empath and someone who has empathy?
Well, empathy is when your heart goes out to somebody and you feel something for them, either pangs of happiness for their success or pangs of sorrow for their sorrow. All right, but the difference is the empath feels all that, but actually takes on the emotion in their body, so it becomes your own. You suck it up, and you become that.
And so when it's psychological pain, you feel someone else's distress or even guilt or anything of those
they're
things.
Feeling, you can potentially feel.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I as I open the show, many people are labeled sensitive, and it's never you're sensitive. It's always you're too sensitive. Right.
That's the horrible thing that is said to empaths that shames them as children. And as a child, I was called too overly sensitive, and my mother, who was a doctor, told me, just get a thicker skin, dear, which was not helpful. And it was what many empaths are told. And so I want to give empaths the support they deserve with this book and just tell them the real truth about what it means to have the sensitivities, which means it's a gift. You just have to learn to manage the more difficult parts of taking on other people's energy. And that's what the book is about.
Dr. Judith Orloff, The Empath's Survival Guide, Life Strategies for Sensitive People. Okay, so how do you do that? How do you, first of all, know if you're an empath? I guess the way you would know is that you would feel very much for other people to the point that you took on those feelings, even physical feelings. And then what?
Yeah, what I suggest that everyone take the self-assessment test in the beginning of the Empath Survival Guide to determine how much of an empath you are. And there are questions like, have I been labeled as, quote, overly sensitive all my life in a derogatory way? Do crowds drain me, and do I need alone time to revive myself? That's key for empaths. They replenish themselves alone.
Oh, replenish themselves alone. Mm-hmm.
Not with people so much.
Right.
Do noise, smells, or excessive talkers drain me? Because empaths are often very noise sensitive and smell sensitive. Like they could go in a elevator with perfume in it, and to an empath it could feel like you're being nuked or suffocated. But to another person they could say, oh, what pretty perfume. And do I have chemical sensitivities or a low tolerance for scratchy clothes? Do I prefer taking my own car places so that I can leave early when I need to? As empaths never like to get stuck places because then they might go on sensory overload if they overstay their welcome.
Right.
So I limit my socializing time for 2 hours for that reason, so I don't get overwhelmed.
How clever.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah, and do you tell people that?
Yeah, totally. I always tell, especially if I drive with somebody, that they will have to leave early with me or else I'll take my own car.
Right, and when you show up and leave 2 hours later, do you ever explain that?
Yeah, sometimes if it's warranted. But most of my friends know I'm an empath, so they get it.
Yeah. When did you first learn you were an empath or give yourself that title?
Well, I didn't have the vocabulary for it as a child, but I've always been an empath, always picking up things. I couldn't go into shopping malls or crowded places without going in fine and then walking out exhausted with stomach or pain I didn't have before, and not realizing that I was absorbing it from the crowds. Yeah, so I always knew it, but I didn't really put a word onto it, I think, probably till my 30s. I didn't really know what it was. And so it was in the book, I talk about how I tried to run from my sensitivities, in my late teens and early 20s by getting involved with drugs and alcohol. And I have a chapter in the book on empaths and addictions because they often try and shut off the sensory overload with addictions, which isn't a good thing. And so there are other more healthy mechanisms to use other than addictions to deal with your sensitivities. But I just, I told my example of that, and why not to do that in the book. So,
and why not to use drugs, you're saying?
Yeah, why not to use drugs and alcohol to numb yourself out so that you don't feel overstimulated or like everything's too much. Empaths often go on what's called sensory overload, where everything just seems like too much. Sound, sight, smells, people. You can't stand hearing anything else. It's just too much. You want to shut it off. And so people who are addicts turn to drugs and alcohol or sex or food. There's a section on food addiction because some empaths become quite obese because they self-medicate this sense of being overloaded with food. And that is not healthy either. So there are other things to do to calm yourself down, other than overeating or taking drugs.
And I would imagine, Dr. Orloff, that the comorbidity of this is about low self-esteem and just basically and even depression. so that people don't even know that, they've kind of internalized not only the overload, but the attitudes that other people have to put you down, and, oh, you're just being difficult. What are you, the princess and the pea?
Right.
And,